I'm Nick Tuwhangai, where our hapu is Ngāti Hikairo. Yeah, I was virtually, I grew up here on this land with my great-grandparents. And so, yeah, it's been a long association for me here on Mokai Kainga. This was my home, this was where my grandparents lived. We grew up in the house with my grandparents, and it was after they passed away that my dad and his sisters decided to build a marae here at Mokai Kainga. Well, originally the carvings, when the meeting house was first built, there were no carvings at all on it. And it was in later years that the Wānanga o Aotearoa, they found Rongo Wetere, came and offered to carve the front of the meeting house because there were no carvings. And it was also to support my dad and his sisters because they were his supporters when he set up the Wānanga o Aotearoa. And so they supported him, and that was, he did the carvings as his koha to the marae for the support that he got from the old people of this marae. The carvings that are there, when they went to carve them, and then I spoke to my dad about, no, I didn't speak to my dad, I just said to Rongo Wetere, if he would just get something nice carved, it didn't matter what it was, as long as there was some nice carvings. He went away and came back and said, no, the boys wouldn't carve it unless they had something to carve, they had a story to carve. And so I said, well, in that case, I'll have to talk to my dad because they don't know what's going on. I was just getting it done as a surprise for them. Oh. Then I went to ask my dad, and he said, carve, put the teko on top of the building will be Mōrea. Mōrea was Dad's great-great-grandfather. Then he said, put Manga on one side, who was Mōrea's daughter, that was Dad's great-grandmother. Put Manga on one side, that was Mōrea's daughter, and Hua Manuka on the other side, who was Manga's daughter. And that was my dad's grandmother. And that was my dad's mother. And that was my grandmother. My Manga was my grandmother. No, I'm sorry. Hua Manuka was my grandmother, who was Dad's mother. So that was, Mōrea was Dad's great-grandfather. Manga was his grandmother. Hua Manuka was Dad's mother, and then my dad. So, and then one side is Manga, on the right-hand side facing the building is Hua Manuka, who was Dad's mother. The tiko that was on top is the one in the building there. That was Mōrea. And then when we carved the centre pole in the front, that carving was depicting the husband of Manga, who was a Scotsman. His name was George Hull. He was Dad's great-grandfather. He was Dad's great-grandfather. And he was the father of Manga, of Hua Manuka. He was married to Manga, had Hua Manuka, who was Dad's mother. I said to Dad about the carvings, I said, I didn't believe that women should be on the front of the building, that it wasn't a place for women. And my dad said to me, well, the first voice you hear on a marae is a woman when they call. That's the first voice. He said, someday you'll stand on this marae by yourself and you'll have no one to call for you. Leave those two women to call to welcome anybody onto this marae. So that's why there are two women on the front. George Hull was Hua Manuka's father, he was the Scotsman. He was married to Māga, and that was our grandmother's father. That was my great-grandfather. Anyway, that's the sort of the story of the carvings. The other carvings on the top, on the maihis, on the right-hand side, is the Aotea canoe. The Aotea canoe came into the Aotea harbour, and today it still rests in that harbour. The Tainui canoe is on the other side, on the Kāwhia harbour. It came into the Kāwhia harbour, and it stays, and it's still down there at the Makatū Marae. So we got Tainui on this side, we got the Aotea canoe. Aotea canoe is in the Aotea harbour. The Aotea canoe is the canoe that the Taranaki people came on. And their canoe is still in the harbour, as told by our tūpuna. Because as children, we were always told there was one place in the harbour that we weren't allowed to go and swim all. They said this, you've got all that harbour to swim in, you don't have to swim over there. And when we asked as children why, they said, kei reira te waka o Aotea e takatoana. So we weren't allowed there. And they said as they used to go across the top at different times, they'd look down in the water and they'd see, looked like a row of people sitting, and it was all their hair was the seaweed all in a line, and it was going like this. It looked like the hair of those on the canoe. So that's really the story. The marae is not an old marae. This is the youngest marae in this area. It was built in about 1970. It was started in about 1950-52 that it was actually turned into a marae. And it was started here in 1952. And so this building was built in 1972. And so that's how old the marae is. This was built. But originally they'd bought a building and they stood it where the meeting house is, the wharekai, and it was just a hall, and that was the beginnings of the marae, because the old house was still standing here, the house of my grandparents, and it was later demolished to make way for this. But what they did is someone set fire to the house and burnt it, and then when it was burnt, they scraped up all the ashes. The old people scraped them up. They dug a hole underneath, and then they buried all the ashes under this building. And they said, "Waihotia ngā pungarehu hei whakamahana I te whare hou." That is, keep all the ashes buried under here to warm the new building when it's built. So that's why it's the name Mokai Kainga. Well, this is Mokai Kainga, and that name was given to the marae by the last king, King Koro, the grandfather of the present day king. He said to name it Mokai Kainga. So that's virtually the story of this marae. And as a family, we just run it, open the marae to any groups, any peoples, and we try and make it a home for a lot of people. There's a lot of work to be done today. We have a lot of restoration work and tidying up, because as you can see, some of the carvings are starting to perish and rot, and so we're going to have to do them all up. But that's a work in progress for us all the time. That big carving.
The big one, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's Mōrea. That's the one supposed to be the teko on top of this building.
Okay.
It was supposed to be, but our auntie who lived here said, because of the high winds here and the height of that and the size of that carving, it may fall and it would kill someone if it fell on them.
Oh, that was supposed to go
That's the
up
one
here.
supposed to be up the top.
Oh.
That carving there was one that I just made, and an old guy who was sort of teaching me to carve, he said, "What a waste of wood." He said, "It's such a big piece of wood. Why don't you make something for your house?" And I said, "Well, what?" And he said, "Well, make make a good koruru for the top of the house. So we really don't have a name for it. It was never named, but we as a family have come to realise that for the significance of the area and the canoes and the harbour and those are the waves and everything in there, we called it Tangaroa. Hey. So that's in it. But no one in there is the one supposed to be on top of the house. So currently I've got other plans to try and utilise it better than it just standing the way it is.
All my 22 years, I didn't know that.
Hey?
All my 22 years of living, I didn't know that.
Oh,
Lucky I did this then.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even know that those were canoes.
yeah, well, those represent canoes, eh? Those represent the two canoes.
Yeah.
That's Tainui on one side and Aotea on the other side.
Did not know that.
The carvings up there,
Along the post?
yeah, the first figure at the top,
Yeah.
that's the captain of the Tainui canoe, that's Hoturoa.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
then the one on this side, the captain of that is, heck, I'm starting to forget who they all are now. And all the others have got names, but they've got stories.
Yeah.
And I said, well, is it hard enough for me to remember Hoturoa and Tainui? And the Aotea canoe was not Ngā Toroirangi, he come off the Arawa canoe. Turi, that's Turi. Turi was the captain of the Aotea canoe.
Yeah.
And that's Turi at the top. The figure is just this side, and the one on that side is Hoturoa.
Yes.
And that's Turi and the Aotea canoe. Yeah, so. But they did have a story for all the rest they were telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. That's
So in the original, did the first whare that was here, did it have to go why this was built?
No, they wanted to build a house and they wanted to build it there. So they just burnt it to get rid of it. Because nobody wanted to go and pull it down. You know, everybody started crying, oh, we want to build a house, but we can't pull that house down. So somebody just set fire to it. One of the family, and next thing it was burnt. And while they're standing here crying, one was round the back setting fire to it, and next thing it went up in flames.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how they got rid of it. That stopped the crying. Yeah, so, and then we built the dining room. We've lengthened it, it was short before the front.
Yeah.
See, you can see the concrete, and that up there. Well, that was how long the front was. And me and Uncle Dave,
Just like the blue one.
yeah,
So all this wasn't here.
yeah, we added just me and Uncle Dave
Oh.
to make it longer. Because the rain used to come down and go right inside the house.
Yeah.
Like when the rain was coming down, it'd go right
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. Too close.
And then people's shoes got all wet.
Yep.
So we lengthened it, you know, to
Make it better.
just to make it better. And that's why we lengthened it. Yeah. And that's what I said. George Hall, his married name was Korihako.
Yes, he's in the. When you said his name was George Harley, he's in the. There's a story about him in the whakapapa book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. But his name is Korihako, his married name.
Yeah.
And Tawhia named him Korihako.
Yeah.
And he was Dad's grandfather.
Oh yeah.
He was the father of Huamanuka,
Yes. Kuku's grandmother.
grandfather.
Yeah, Huamanuka, Kuku's grandmother.
No, Huamanuka was his mother.
Oh yeah.
Mama was his grandmother.
And that was her partner.
That was her partner. So this is his grandfather and that's his grandmother.
Grandmother.
And his mother.
So our great.
Yeah, that's right.
Do we have any greats?
No.
Well, no, it's the great inside there. It's the great who was the father of Manga.
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah.
Maudea.
Maudea was the father of Manga. Manga was the mother of Huamanuka, And Hui Manuka was Dad's father.
Oh, so he's out. I thought he was like out. He just watched over us as we slept.
He was a big fella. He was the fella who was still a cannibal.
Okay.
And apparently when they stopped that cannibalism, and they said, as an old man, he used to sit in front of the fire. They had an open fire, he said he'd sit there and looking in the fire. And if he saw a young child, a young girl, it was always young girls, that he said, oh, me no te ao o mua, pai no te maua, te werohi atu, te rākau, pai no te atu I te ahi. So the young girls, apparently in their time, you know, they would kill one or something, and it might be a raiding party, they'd get a young girl, a good fat girl, and then they would just push a stick through her and then just put her over the fire and flames and roast her and then sit and eat her. That's what he was like. And I mean, we can't get away from the fact that we come from that line, you know, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It was
just the way it was.
I suppose in their day, that was the mark of a rangatira.
Right.
Hey,
Yeah.
you know, to be able to go and get from another tribe, a young one, and eat them. So,
That was how they kept
yeah,
their rangatira-ness
Yeah.
up there.
yeah. And so
Rangatira-ness,
when they carved
mighty
this,
chief.
when they were carving this, it wasn't until they had just about finished when I went over and I saw it and I said, oh, that guy was a Scotsman, a full Scotsman. And they said, oh, you should have told us we were going to put a kilt on him, you know. And I said, oh. But Dad just said to put a pipe in his, because he used to smoke a clay pipe there. He always walked around with a clay pipe. And he's Celia's tupuna too. He left here and went over there and married another woman and had Celia's great-grandfather.
Goddamn,
Father.
keeping it in the
And
whānau.
then, no, and when John wanted to marry Celia, John went home and he said to Dad, oh, Dad, he wants to marry Celia. And Dad said, yeah, paiana, ko kōrua no kōrua, that you are both the same. Hey. So, and Celia's grandfather was the descendant of that fellow. So,